pal.
Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Norio Ventures, and welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with a team at Top Tier Recruitment. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. This week, we talked to Zac Liew from Curlec, a fintech startup helping SMEs overlooked by traditional banks collect recurring payments with their automated platform, replacing manual methods like cash, checks, and credit cards. Zac and I connected recently through our respective networks from one of those conversations that went like, hey Pete, based on what you just said, you need to meet Zac Liew. Being a trusting soul, I did just that. And you're listening to the result of that decision right now. In this conversation, Zac and I connected on a more universal level with our respective interests in society, how people spend money, and the impact of our parents on our tendencies to build. With that, let's just get on with the rest of the story with Zac Liew on this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're recording today from the home studio, and we're on with Zac Liew, co-founder and CEO of Curlec, who provide a smarter way for businesses to collect recurring payments. And since founding in late 2017, have processed $50 million in transactions, and more than 300 businesses currently use its platform. Welcome to the show, Zac.
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great to have you on. I think as we talked about a few weeks ago after your pal Philip Vasquez from TSN in Gibraltar, shout out to Philip, who I was talking to about digital asset management. He hooked us up. This is our first journey east with Money Never Sleeps, which is just a ridiculous thought with our global networks. But we tended to focus on the stories closer to home. But with everything that's going on in the world right now these days, what better time to expand our minds, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's an honor to be the first guest you've had from the East on the show.
Yeah, I had a conversation with somebody from one of the big banks probably about a year and a half ago who was kind of a fintech champion and or something to that effect. And I was trying to have a conversation with her to tee her up for the podcast, and I think I just stumbled over what it was that I did with my day job so much that she just didn't want to talk to me ever again. So it's great to have you on, Zac. Tell me, how are things going in Kuala Lumpur right now? How are things looking?
Yeah, so things here are easing up quite a lot, if I'm being honest. We're sort of in the final stage or final phase of the lockdown here. So a lot of things have opened back up, sort of gyms have opened back up. We can travel domestically, and it's sort of strange how things have sort of gone back to normal, sort of from a business perspective. You know, we've had our office back up and open for about 3-4 weeks now, but it's somewhat been an interesting period because, you know, as you can imagine, you know, we've sort of got so used to working remotely that actually it's sort of shifted the whole way in which we think about the office and sort of how we, bring people onto the team and sort of also the resource that we have at our capacity. So it's been an interesting period and sort of, in a way, interesting, but also a little bit scary how quickly things have sort of shot back to normal. What about on your side of the world?
Yeah, in Dublin, I mean, we're I don't know, phase 2, call it that. I mean, things have just seemed so surreal. My whole way of working is just changed. I've stopped going into town, into the city center of Dublin, obviously, 3 months ago. And now I'm saying to people, I don't see a reason to go back, right? And it just seems so bizarre that I live 6 miles away from, one of the greatest cities in Europe, and I just haven't been in there at all in the last few months. It just seems such a foreign thought, right? And I never thought that would have been possible. But what it has put on me is this greater discipline just to get through my day and to get everything done for the clients I'm working with, right? And that you no longer have the commute, you no longer have that what can end up being, good 2.5 hours per day in terms of travel time, not only getting from home into town, but then also traveling around town, going to different meetings. So it's, I am a social character though, so I do kind of miss it, and I miss that human interaction. I was just thinking this morning when I got up to make the coffee that, geez, I did the same thing for the last 3 days. Got up in the morning, got the coffee going. It's just, I need a bit more variation into my life,
Yeah, for sure. I can completely feel you on the commuting and everything. I think if you or any of your listeners have been to KL, you will know sort of the traffic in Kuala Lumpur, particularly over rush hour periods, are just an absolute nightmare. So this lockdown period has been eye-opening and sort of good that I can sort of get past that.
Absolutely. Yeah, my pal Barry Skinner lives in KL. Shout out to Barry. And he mentioned the traffic as being one of the things that took getting used to. He used to travel back and forth between a little town called Ferns on the east coast of Ireland in Wexford to go back and forth between the office for the bank he worked for in Dublin and the office for the same bank had another office in Waterford. And he was just, ran through tires on his car once a year and had to get him changed just because he was doing so much of that. Anyway, long story short, listen, really interested to hear about what you're doing with Curlec, your story, and how this all started. I think one of the things that your pal Philip Vasquez mentioned to me when he suggested we get in touch is that you made the Forbes 30 under 30 in 2020 for finance and venture capital in Asia, which is awesome. And I want to kind of come back to that in a minute. But tell us, just to dig in, your backstory and how you got to this point, Zac.
Yeah, sure. So sort of on a personal level, I think I've always had a desire to build something. And, always had a desire to somewhat, pursue a career, or if you want to call it that, an entrepreneurship, really sort of stemming from, family. I grew up with parents who were both entrepreneurs. And sort of growing up with that on a day-to-day basis was sort of, always inspired me to want to build something. I took a little bit of a different route. I didn't quite take the entrepreneurial route. Sort of, I have a legal background. I think the caveat to all of that is that I do have Asian parents who do have traditional views on the world.
Right.
But subsequently after that, sort of tried my hand at a few different things. Once I finished all my legal training, had a stint in Barclays in London, worked for various startups, and eventually ended up back in Malaysia about 3 or so years ago. And got presented the opportunity to help start this company, Curlec. In terms of Curlec itself, there is a little bit of history back to the company. My co-founder, Steve Kusha, who is considerably older than me, he's in his 60s whilst I'm in my 20s.
Right.
He's actually a family friend, but he's been involved in banking technology for many years. He's sort of traveled the world. When Unisys were back being the biggest check process in the world, he was the MD in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Sort of came to Malaysia to try and retire, couldn't, got itchy feet. Subsequently set up a company that produced a whole host of sort of back-end cloud-based software, electronic document record management systems for banks and governments. And one of the contracts he ended up winning was with the clearinghouse here in Malaysia called PayNet. Sort of the bank's equivalent, ACH type company in Malaysia. And anyways, since 2010, we've had the contract with PayNet here to process all paper direct debit mandates for the whole country. So, and that's being used by all major banks in Malaysia. I think at the moment it's about 16 of them. And we've had that contract since 2010. And whilst, system's great, all the processes around it, the fact it's paper-based, the fact, only generally speaking, it's corporates who have access to the system because the banks only serve those guys. They don't really go to the SME level. And what that's meant is that, as a payment mechanism, it's never really well utilized, in a bit of a chicken and egg situation. The central bank here have never invested in it because they say volumes are low. Sort of the counter argument to that is that, hey, if you invest some money into it, volumes will get real high. So anyways, we got a little bit fortunate in sort of 2016, 2017 time. The government at the time, as with all governments around the world, sort of try and incentivize students to pay back their student loans. And part of that scheme was to say, hey, we'll incentivize you by giving you a 10% discount if you sign up for direct debit. What happened was quite literally the clearinghouse here, PayNet, got flooded with paper applications, couldn't handle it, came back to us, and asked us to move to an electronic solution. So sort of from an infrastructure point of view, that's what we did, enabled that sort of for the banks to enable that type of processing. But then sort of, when we did that, it sort of opened up an opportunity. We sort of said, hey, look, there's a big opportunity here because quite frankly, it's an underutilized system. It's never really been available, particularly for the mass SME market. Why don't we try and set up a new company and take this to the mass market? Because we've seen the success of, other companies around the world, Go Cardless in the UK, Trustly in Sweden, and stuff like that. Sort of building that sort of a tech layer, if you like it, on top of sort of bank-to-bank payment infrastructure. So that's what we did. That's where Curlec was born. We founded in 2018. It's been quite a journey since then.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I really like that kind of that natural inclination that you have, though, in terms of having parents who are entrepreneurs. Just this natural tendency to build, and I can definitely associate with those two concepts because my background is quite similar. And your co-founder, how did you guys actually decide that, okay, we've got this story, we have this background, this experience, this energy, this ambition to move ahead? What was the point where you're kind of like, okay, this is absolutely worth doing? Was it that student loan incentivization? Was that really the clicking point for all this?
I think that was, if you want to, that was sort of in a way spurred us on to do it. But I think sort of if you take it up a level, I was living in the UK sort of for 3-4 years ago, and sort of I would come back for holidays, every year or sort of twice a year type of thing. And I think what the interesting was, particularly from sort of a financial perspective or fintech perspective, was every time you came back, it just felt like the country was moving real quick. We were sort of, if I look back even 5 years ago, hardly using any type of card transactions, mainly everything cash. And suddenly, you come back and say, oh, wow, okay, you can do point of sale transactions. Oh, wow, you can do, contactless payments by card. Oh, wow, you can do sort of more e-commerce type transactions because, some of the e-commerce guys were doing sort of cash and delivery type thing here for ages. And it just felt, okay, with the push to get students to pay back via direct debit online, it just felt sort of from a fintech perspective or sort of financial services perspective, there was a big wave that was just about to come. And this is very much part of it. So I think, for us, it was, right timing. There's a lot of incentives going on sort of, between the central bank and sort of from a VC perspective here as well. There's a lot of interest in it. And it just felt right timing to really venture into something like this, particularly in this part of the world.
I get it. I like that. And it's like, you're coming back. You're, like you said, you're seeing things move so quickly. You're seeing things become so digital, but then you see all this paper and you're just inclined to do something about it. Right.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. I like that. That's, there's just something natural about that just kind of harks back to a problem solving mindset that as a founder, you just need to have. Right. Tell me about the home market in Malaysia specifically, right? The trigger point of this being, like you said, at the 10-foot level around the incentivization of students to pay back their loans and the paper processing required, all that, and that click point of saying, or that trigger point of saying, let's make that digital. But then also this kind of societal impact that you talked about as well a minute ago. I've heard you refer to online the subscription economy, right? And are there specific societal things within Malaysia that you think are different to other countries or that are driving this move to a subscription economy? And how do you think that may play out in other geographies?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think, in terms of the subscription economy in Malaysia, it's something that's still relatively new to this part of the world. When we sort of look at the West and starting from the States to sort of Europe, relatively mature. But when you come back to Malaysia, it's still relatively a brand new concept. A good analogy for this is sort of the telco industry in Malaysia. and we look at sort of postpaid versus prepaid penetration, in the West, you could say the majority is postpaid, but in Malaysia as well as the rest of Southeast Asia, prepaid is still the dominant sort of way to pay your telco bills, which to me is pretty crazy. So I think that number is slowly shifting into the, let's call it, postpaid subscription side of the spectrum. And for us, it's how do we help businesses facilitate all of this? There's clearly a demand, from an affordability perspective. I think Southeast Asians or Malaysians, for that matter, want to pay things in smaller bite-sized chunks, and sort of subscriptions are part of that puzzle. But for businesses to facilitate this, if we sort of think, the payment options as an example in the West, generally speaking, very card-based heavy type countries, and then you look at Malaysia, card penetration here is really, really low. For example, credit card penetration in Malaysia is under 20%. Whilst you look at something like online banking or banking for that matter, and in relative terms, we're pretty good. We've got over 85% banking penetration here. But the issue is for subscription-based companies in Malaysia, having the ability to collect subscription payments via bank account is incredibly difficult. Like you said earlier, all paper-based processes and stuff like that. So, I think from our perspective that there's obviously been a gap where we can fill that void, because, you can apply to 85% of your consumers versus 20%, which was happening a lot. We had some subscription-based companies. There was a company, I still remember the early days, they were trying to copy Rent the Runway in the US.
Yeah.
And sort of bring that concept to Malaysia. But because they were tied down with cards, and particularly credit cards, they could only offer this 20% of sort of the people that were interested, which is sort of crazy. So for us, it's coming in, providing a solution where you can pretty much touch most of your addressable market. And for businesses, we now can do that. And I think there's a big shift for sort of consumers to start paying in that manner as well. As you can imagine, so, it's much more affordable.
Yeah, it's just making it easier. Like last night, I was ordering a Father's Day gift for my dad on Amazon, and I had the option of, all right, sorry, it wasn't even Amazon. It was Omaha Steaks, right? He's not he's not a big steak eater, but they have seafood there, right? So I don't think my dad's going to listen to this before Sunday. So Dad, you got these lovely salmon fillets. Okay. So I ordered these for my dad, and I had the option of paying by PayPal, right? Or by inputting all of my credit card details or my debit card details. What do you think I went for? Take a guess.
So what's the choice between PayPal and your debit card?
Yeah.
Gonna guess debit card?
No, it was PayPal. It was, but just on the back end of the conversation, it's that, what was easier? What was the quickest way for me to do this? I have a level of trust with PayPal that, okay, great. This is a website that I hadn't ordered from before or hadn't ordered from in a while. I just want this to be easy and simple. I'm just going to push it through PayPal. PayPal hits my bank account directly, right? Easy peasy, very much done. There's an element of this that I get that you're talking about, Zac, that how can you make it easier for these consumer decisions to just be made where there is a money impact, and enabling them to say, well, I can easily set up this direct debit, and making it possible for, like you said, SMEs to be able to do this. I think it's definitely an impactful thing. Is there a difference in any of this between debit card usage and credit card usage in the Malaysian market, or is it all just cards in general where there was the gap?
Yeah, there is a variance between debit and credit card. Debit card is higher, but particularly what we experience in Malaysia, at least, particularly with debit card transactions, and I think this all has to do with fraud here, is that the failure rates for debit cards, particularly for recurring transactions, are incredibly high. So a lot of businesses choose to just completely disregard that and just move to credit cards.
I gotcha. That makes sense. One of the things that I was thinking about as well was just, in the U.S. and the last time that I was over in the U.S., and I don't know when I'm going to go back, but it shocked me at how many times that I was paying with a card, and I think it was my Revolut card that I was using in the U.S., and I had to sign a piece of paper, right? They printed out a slip for me to sign, and I'm like, this just doesn't feel like it makes sense. And I was thinking about how the U.S. has not yet, now this was a year and a half ago, and like you said, things move quickly, but the U.S. had not yet adapted on a wider scale to even contactless, to kind of being able to pay without signing a credit card slip and those types of things. It just feels like, because of the dependence on credit in the U.S. overall, and that people are using credit cards a heck of a lot more than they're probably using debit cards, right? Because when you spend using a card and it's a debit card, well, generally that comes out of your bank account rather than buy now, pay later that you get with a credit card, right? Does any of that at all play into what's going on in Malaysia, or is it all, like you said a couple of minutes ago, one and the same?
The complete inverse, actually, to what you experienced in the US. So I think, sort of historically in Malaysia, there was at one time a big push for credit, for people to start paying on credit, which backfired here quite a bit. There was a ton of people left in debt. And I think, just generally sort of as a society, we are predominantly, I'm a Chinese Malaysian, but, the majority in Malaysia is Malay Malaysian, Muslim Malaysian. And generally speaking, sort of, when you sort of look at Islamic finance, which, Malaysia is probably one of the biggest countries in the world for Islamic finance. I'm no expert in sort of Islamic products and all that sort of stuff, but taking on debt is something that is very frowned upon in Malaysia. So I think, when we look at that debit versus credit card type thing, people just generally speaking prefer not to take on debt, would rather pay for a debit card. But ultimately, where does that source come from? Comes from the bank account. And I think, that's why just generally people in Malaysia at least prefer to pay by bank accounts here.
Yep, absolutely. I get it. No, I am familiar with Islamic finance, believe it or not. I was involved in the launch of the first Islamic finance fund in Ireland back in the year 2009, 2010. And shout out to the guys from Wethack or Wethack. I will get their pronunciation right. But they're providing a solution for digital sukuks, and sukuks are the primary vehicle for raising debt in or issuing debt in Islamic finance. But it is, like you said, paying interest is, well, it's not allowed under Sharia law. So it's actually profit payments or profit participation that is the way they do it. So that's a very interesting link between my past and this current conversation. One of the other
very
things,
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I saw recently, Zac, in thinking about this conversation that we're having, is an investment by BlackRock, the big global asset manager, as well as a few other financial powerhouses in the Swedish online payments firm Trustly, right? Now, while they only support direct debits in Sweden, their global appeal is definitely driven by how easily they can enable direct payments from your bank account to buy products online. And hence, if in that example that I gave about buying the salmon steaks for my dad, right? If there was an opportunity to just pay directly out of my bank account, I would have done it, which in fact there actually was, because I have PayPal hooked in to my bank account, right? Instead of my credit card. Anyway, if Trustly can scale across borders for enabling bank account payments for individuals and businesses, definitely across diverse verticals. And this is just for one-off purchases, right? Why can't Curlec do the same for direct debits across borders, right? So if Trustly are just doing the Swedish market right now, how are you kind of looking at that and seeing, what's going to be perhaps not giving it all away on your global expansion plan, but tell me how you're thinking about being able to do this across borders.
Yeah, so I think I have checked out Trustly, which is an interesting company. Obviously, has parallels to what we're trying to do in this part of the world. I think the first thing to note is actually the Trustly one-off payment, sort of is it a direct payment type of thing? We have that in Malaysia, which is a completely separate product to direct debit. It's sort of a one-off generally speaking, e-commerce type transactions with your bank account, which is routed through the central clearinghouse.
Gotcha.
So we've got that, and actually, sort of, I think it might be the fastest growing payment product in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. You know, faster than e-wallets here, faster than sort of card transactions and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of demand. I think to answer your question, Pete, about how do we scale this, cross-border and stuff like that. Obviously, it's something we talk about all the time. But I think, for us, we're very Southeast Asian centric. And in order, particularly for bank-to-bank payments, making sure the rails are up there, the rails are in place that, we can go to those countries and subsequently, provide either direct debit or sort of these online banking one-off type transactions. So what has been encouraging, though, is that more and more, maybe we're, a couple of years behind sort of the West in all of this, is that you sort of look at, you play Southeast Asia on a map, and you sort of can point out all these different countries who are moving to faster payments, bank-to-bank payments, obviously the rise of open APIs in this part of the world as well. And I think it's an interesting period because from a scalability perspective, it's becoming much, much easier to do that. And particularly now, there are talks within Southeast Asia, at least, to have some sort of alternative cross-border rails, something similar to SEPA in Europe, albeit we're not sort of a block like the EU. Southeast Asia is very disjointed. But I think from our perspective, we're very much focusing or sort of keeping a close eye on what's going on there because it's increasingly becoming more and more interesting, this part of the world, especially sort of when central banks start to work together, because up until now, it's been very fragmented, Southeast Asia. I know quite a lot of people sort of loop this region into one, but sort of when you go into sort of the details of it all, not only sort of culturally is it completely different country to country, but sort of infrastructure-wise, just worlds apart. So,
That's really interesting, and it got me thinking about something just now, Zac. In that, there's the patience of saying, "Listen, we're gonna grow this in Malaysia as much as we can, and perhaps wait for the rails to be in place across other countries." Or there is the approach of saying, "We will be able to build one product that sits on top of multiple different types of rails." Right, which is a different proposition, right? On that second one, you're probably going to spend more money on the tech side to develop that one homogeneous product that can sit on top of multiple different sets of rails. In the first scenario, where you are waiting and scaling in Malaysia, it sounds like with 300. Businesses using the product and 50 million in transactions already, you're doing pretty well. But, there's going to be an element of, well, how long can you wait, right? So have you thought about that kind of building on top of multiple sets of rails versus just that waiting? What do you think the likely scenario is going to be for you guys?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sort of you've hit sort of in a way, it is a bit of a business dilemma at the moment, which we sort of are quite wary of. Because, sort of the exposure we have is sort of obviously to rails and banking infrastructure, and which in a way is out of our hands. So you do have to play that waiting game. So I think, from our perspective, we have been speaking a lot about this whole subscription type economy, and diversifying a little bit away from payments. And as you said, building a homogeneous product which sort of sits on top of multiple rails. And at the time of speaking now, we actually can facilitate much more than just sort of bank to bank. We're now rolling out, or we have rolled out card payments. We're sort of looking down the e-wallet route as well. And really for us, I think in terms of that homogeneous product, we're very interested in the subscription economy, but also sort of producing a piece of software that can help businesses, particularly in Southeast Asia, where it's highly localized, to facilitate all of this and obviously, build up the rails to facilitate all of that. So I think that's one of the directions we're looking at. But, at the same time, we're still also looking, and like I said, keeping a close eye on, what's going on sort of from an infrastructure perspective and making sure that, if the rails are there, we can scale that way too. But I think, we're hedging our bets here. And to be perfectly honest, we're sort of going down both routes at the moment. and sort of just seeing which one really opens up for us. And I think it is, you've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you, and just thinking about the very introduction point for the two of us, being from Philip Vasquez, I was also introduced to another lawyer who was involved in how Gibraltar set up their whole digital asset regime there. And that where it was almost like the lawyers kind of got together and said, well, listen, if we create this regime, we will bring more business our way, right? They naturally will. And so they put some time and effort into getting the legislation in place. If you guys spend some time and effort in connecting Southeast Asian countries and the banking rails, then that will naturally put more volume onto your product, right? So, I think it's all a means to an end, right?
That's right.
I like that. Just kind of changing tack a little bit, Zac. What do you think throughout your journey over the last number of years? What do you think are some of the personality traits that have been helpful to you in getting the business as far beyond what you mentioned at the beginning around just this natural tendency to build? Yeah,
so I think if I were to say the number one would sort of probably be persistence and resilience.
Yeah.
Starting off in a very new product in this part of the world. And I think, particularly in Malaysia, other parts of Southeast Asia are slightly different. When we were initially looking for funding, that was interesting now that I look back on it, but, challenging period. VC pool or investor pool more generally is relatively shallow here. Or at least, sort of the high growth type startup sort of thing is not as sort of well known here as it is in a Silicon Valley or London or whatever. So I think in the initial early days, being super resilient, persistent, the amount of sort of people that turned us away and, pitches we had to do and all that sort of stuff, it was sort of crazy. And now that I look back on it, and to be honest, we still go through that. But, you do grow thick skin and sort of just take it on the chin and just move on. So I think sort of for me, that's been the number one. And also just, I think the other thing is just, pushing yourself and throwing yourself in uncomfortable situations. I'm sort of just a first time entrepreneur, and to be perfectly candid with all of this, I'm learning as I go along. And I think, just putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations, you'll eventually become comfortable. And I think, that was also a big learning curve for me, just having that willingness to put myself there. And sort of once you sort of get uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, it's, you look at things differently, and it gives you a slightly different perspective on things.
Absolutely. Being a startup founder is like every single day applying for a job that you're completely unqualified for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
that's a great analogy.
and it's always, you just got to push. You got to push. We hear persistence a lot. Absolutely. Going through brick walls, when we ask this question. I was reading something the other day on what makes a great kind of VP of sales at the startup level. And naturally, a founder needs to be their own VP of sales first, right? And that, things such as persistence, such as a natural curiosity, the ability to enlist others, right? And get help from other folks within your network. But then also this, tied to curiosity is this desire to continuously learn. Right. And the guy that I was listening to on the Full Ratchet podcast that I listened to quite a bit, Nick Moran hosts that, but he had a guy on, I forget his name, that he was focused very much on sales at the startup level. And he said, something to the effect of before a founder goes out and hires their head of sales, they need to have perfected that sales process themselves first. One of the number one questions they ask, because curiosity is just so important and learning is just so important, is what was the last book you read? What was the last podcast you listened to? And if the person that they're interviewing for that VP of sales role can't answer that question well, then that is kind of a sign that they're lacking in curiosity and that desire to learn, right? But anyway, what do you think in terms of sounding boards for you in terms of advice? It sounds like you've got a pretty experienced co-founder, and I'm sure that you guys have quite a lot of interesting conversations. And beyond him, who else is there?
Yeah, so I think, to start off with sort of the co-founder, Steve, I think, yeah, he's definitely sort of a big sounding board, if you want to call it the yin to the yang. He obviously a wealth of experience. I think, on that level, there is another sort of, let's call it early investor. He's an advisor to the board, a fellow called Raj Lorenz, who again has a wealth of experience in the payments and banking space in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. He was previously headed up a company called GHL here, which is the biggest payments company in Southeast Asia, for that matter. So he's, has experience not only scaling companies, but scaling companies cross-border in this part of the world. So, a massive sounding board, that I can rely on. So yeah, I mean, on a business level, those two guys, really, do help out. I think on a personal level, the KL is actually quite a small scene, and particularly in the startup scene, everyone tends to know everyone. So sort of having that founder to founder type relationships is great too. I think
absolutely.
The safety in numbers and sort of, everyone goes to the ride, and not many people understand it. So I think, I have quite a lot of relationships with startup founders here, as well as some other Southeast Asian companies, and sort of, I've got a good support network on a personal level around me as well, which is great.
That's great. And what impact did the Forbes 30 under 30 have on your network in terms of kind of enriching these, helpful voices for you?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the press we have got up until now has been sort of domestic, if you want to call it that, just really within Malaysia. I think what the Forbes 30 under 30 thing did was actually propel my network sort of regionally, whether that's the whole of South Asia and more particularly Southeast Asia, which definitely raised attention, which again has been good for the company's profile.
That's great. Yeah, these things can help quite a bit. I work with a fintech, or close with a fintech here in Dublin called Fundrex, and a few years ago, they just said to me, Pete, listen, we want to help expand our network, and we think that a one-day event is a great way to do that. Obviously, this was way before COVID, and the impact that's had in terms of getting 300 or 400 people that to come for a day and hang out with you and listen to all these speakers that you put in front of them that are sharing some interesting topics amongst like-minded souls. That's had a big impact, right, in terms of the expansion of their network. And these, in effect, Adminovate, for all the good things that it does, is a media exercise, more or less, right? And, I can totally see the parallel there to being able to do something like the Forbes 30 under 30. Looking ahead, Zac, what do you think is the next big hump to get over?
The $1 million question. So I think for us, obviously scaling the business is the biggest hump. Like you said, I think that there is that dilemma. Do we wait on the rails, or do we sort of build a homogenous product that we can scale pretty efficiently or pretty quickly? So that's one thing. And I think so. If we just sort of stick to Malaysia, another sort of hump we need to get over is, I think, something that's been ongoing is just general education of the market here, for fintech, for online payments, particularly for with something like direct debit, a pull-based payment method. Like I said earlier, that prepaid to postpaid ratio is still sort of in the prepaid direction. So I think for us, still a continuous job educating the market. With more and more fintech players coming to the market, more general tech players who are moving into the fintech realm coming into the market. I think we're getting a little bit more help this time. From now on in, and sort of education in the Malaysian market, as well as sort of the next steps in terms of scaling the business is really sort of the next hump. Okay,
I get it. And I think there's, I really like this element of the business of, looking at Southeast Asia, looking at the societal norms, or just the way that people spend money, and the way that, whatever payment types that they use, and how that can influence a path to scale here. I think that is, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently. I'm on the board of a company called Pipit Global here in Ireland. Shout out to Ollie Walsh. I'm doing a lot of shout outs this episode. But, and kind of seeing their journey through, cash remittances and digitalizing all of that. has been quite interesting, and looking at different economies and this migrant path from home country to host country all over the world. I think there's a connectivity point there for you with all this. We can cover that afterwards. But just to wrap up, Zac, what do you think is one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about Zac Liew?
One thing. I think at least in Malaysia, I think the one thing people really don't know about me is actually I'm a very private person. I know there's sort of at least in Malaysia and stuff like that, there is a sort of a external front, but I think, at least for the majority of that, I'm a relatively private person and keep quite a close circle around me, for better or for worse. But I think that's probably the one thing people don't know about me.
Yeah, no, that's highly advisable. I've got a friend who's an extremely private person as well. And he shared something with me that I thought was relatively innocuous. And then a couple months later, I'm meeting up with him again. And I'm not going to reveal the topic because he is a private person. But I let him know that I had shared something with someone about himself that I thought was, rather, that most folks would know. And he's like, "Pete, I told you that in confidence." I'm like, "Oh, dude, sorry. I thought it was something." And it in any other instance, it would have been completely fine. But it's just that he's a private person. He prefers to keep things, private, right? So, respect to that in a big way, and that can, really lead you down a path of making sure that you're trusting the right people, right? So absolutely. Great. Well, Zac, listen, I learned a lot on this episode. I think you're definitely expanding my mind, not only from a fintech perspective, but from a societal perspective as well. So thank you so much for coming out to the show.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That does it for this week, folks, and thanks to Zac for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Links and show notes for this episode are on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for editing this podcast. As for me, I increase the odds of startup success. Get in touch through the contact page on norioventures.com, and you can check out what Owen Fitzgerald is up to these days on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!